Number 1.
Airtight Bridge is one of Coles County's best-kept secrets. Located along Airtight Road, it is the only direct route between the village of Ashmore and the unincorporated towns of Bushton and Rardon. The location is isolated, and most people do not come upon it by accident. The bridge itself is interesting enough, but it was a gruesome discovery over 25 years ago on the banks of the Burrows River that really ignited the local imagination. Since that time, visitors have returned from nightly excursions with many unusual tales to tell. Locals say the bridge earned the name Airtight because of the unnatural stillness encountered while crossing it. Designed by Claude L. James, Airtight Bridge was built in 1914 by the Decatur Bridge Company. Thanks to its remote location, it became known as a drinking spot for local teens and students from Eastern Illinois University. Otherwise, the bridge, which even 30 years ago was described as old and creaky, had a pretty mundane existence. In 1981, it was added to the National Register of Historic Places on account of event, architecture engineering. That event was the discovery, 1 year prior, of the nude body of a woman floating near the bank of the Burrows River, a few yards downstream from Airtight Bridge. Because the body was missing its head, hands, and feet, the murder investigation became known as the Airtight Torso case. Although many details of the case have been forgotten, the event itself has not. It was a pleasant Sunday morning on October 19, 1980. William and Tim Brown, two brothers from rural Urbana, were on a deer hunting trip when they took the road down to Airtight at around 11 o'clock. As they crossed the bridge, one of the brothers noticed something unusual in the shallow waters of the Burrows, so they pulled over to the side of the road. At the same time, a local farmer named Victor Hargis was on his way to assist his son in digging a well. Seeing both the men and the partially decomposed remains, he stopped and joined William in going down to the river's edge to take a closer look. The two could hardly believe their eyes. Victor sprang into action. He drove home and called the sheriff's department. Darrell Cox, a deputy at the time, was at the firing range when he got the call. It took him nearly 20 minutes to navigate the back roads from Charleston to the bridge, but he was familiar with the route because it was one the sheriff's department routinely patrolled. Recalling his first impression of the crime scene, Mr. Cox, now the county sheriff, told the Daily Eastern News, "I could tell from when I got there that the body was missing its head and feet. I remember when I first saw it standing on the bridge, it didn't look like a person." As police cordoned off the crime scene and word spread of the discovery, reporters and television crews descended on the remote location. Police worked into the evening using scuba divers to scour the river for clues, but the missing body parts, which had been severed fairly cleanly, were never found. The cause of death was also never determined. Coles County Coroner Dick Lynch described the woman as being in her 20s, rather flat-chested, not in the habit of shaving, about 5 feet 9 inches, weighing around 130 pounds, with dark auburn hair. He deduced that she had not been dead more than a day or so, and that she had been killed somewhere other than at the bridge. Her remains were immediately shipped to Springfield to be examined by pathologist Dr. Grant Johnson at Memorial Medical Center, but he was unable to uncover anything conclusive. In Dr. Johnson's initial examination, he determined that the woman had an uncommon A-positive blood type. She did not have any major scars, birthmarks, or tattoos that might have given a clue as to her identity, nor was it easy to determine the time of death. Aside from trace amounts of aspirin, there were no drugs, poisons, or alcohol in her bloodstream, and no evidence of rape or abuse. Without the head or hands, and without any abrasions on the body, it was impossible for the coroner to even determine if a struggle preceded death. Investigators heralded the determination of the blood type as an important clue in a case that was rapidly going cold. Sheriff Lister told the Journal-Gazette that it could narrow things down significantly. Unfortunately, he also revealed that checks of missing persons reports failed to produce any substantial leads. By Thursday, October 23, the sheriff's department suspended the search for clues in and around the river. Nearly a year after her discovery, the unidentified body was laid to rest in Charleston's Mound Cemetery, under the name Jane Doe. Those who remembered the case occasionally traveled to her grave and left flowers or other tokens of their sympathy. Finally, in 1992, 12 years after the discovery of the body, there was a break in the case. On November 20th, the Sheriff's Department held a press conference in Charleston, this time to announce that the identity of the Airtight victim had been ascertained. Her name was Diana Marie Riordan Small, a resident of Bradley, Illinois, who disappeared from her home a short time before her remains were found over 100 miles away in Coles County. The revelation was the result of cooperation between Coles County Sheriff's Detective Art Bayer and Detective Stephen Coy of the Bradley Police Department. Slowly but surely, a picture of what happened to Diana Small began to emerge. The reason that no one who matched the description of the body found at Airtight turned up in the missing persons reports was that Diana was never reported missing. Her husband told police he wasn't all that concerned because Small had left home on occasions before the Journal-Gazette reported. Furthermore, Diana's mother and sister had joined a small Christian sect before moving west, where they became disconnected from Diana and her husband. After nearly a decade, her sister, Virginia, left the church and moved to North Carolina. Virginia decided to get in touch with the rest of her family and learned of her sister's disappearance, at which point she filed a missing persons report. According to Dave Foppe of the Journal-Gazette, Detective Art Bayer saw the report on a national listing, realized Small's descriptions matched that of the Airtight Bridge victim, and contacted Bradley police. A DNA test confirmed the match. In October 2008, the anonymous headstone that had marked the grave of Diana Small was replaced with one bearing her name. With the laying of a new monument, this chapter of the Airtight Bridge murder came to an end, but the family of the victim and the few who refused to give up the pursuit of justice will never forget. Those rusted burgundy trestles that span the embarrass along that winding road in rural Coles County will always elicit a tingle along the spines of visitors, as well as a supernatural sense that something very wrong happened there.
Number 2.
Unsolved mysteries and cold cases have entranced the American public for decades. We are fascinated by urban myths and legends, and even the supernatural. When our forensics teams and authorities can't figure out what happened, we often try to fill in the blanks on our own. But what happens when even that is difficult? Here are some of the strangest unsolved cold cases and mysteries in the state of Illinois. Married couple Gilbert and Trudy Woods unearthed what would later be called the Devil's Stone in their backyard in the 70s. The etchings included two intertwining serpents. Where did the stone come from? Nobody knows. But what happened once it was unearthed is the strange part. Gilbert had a heart attack. Trudy went blind for a few months. She was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis soon thereafter. The couple understandably came to believe the stone was cursed and gave it to a friend who experienced paranormal phenomena like lights turning on and off and a bee infestation during the winter. Where is the Devil's Stone today? Nobody knows. An old urban legend says that a group of friends attempted to escape a freak thunderstorm by finding shelter in a nearby cave in the late 1800s. The group later went to the authorities after discovering a man dressed in a long black robe and the body of a woman dressed in white fabric. The woman was surrounded by candles, as if some weird ritual were being performed by the cloaked man. But the police found nothing when they went into the same cave. Was the group of friends telling the truth? You decide. In 1980, two men discovered the nude body of a woman near Airtight Bridge. She had been decapitated and her hands and feet severed. The extra parts were missed. She wasn't identified until 1992, but her killer was never found. And the worst part, how can you hire a wrongful death lawyer when you don't know who to sue? A deaf and mute teen was discovered stumbling through Jacksonville back in 1945. Police couldn't identify him, and he was sent to a mental health facility where he would spend the rest of his life forever, known as John Doe number 24. Toward the end of his life, he began to enact circus routines, leaving residents wondering about his childhood before police discovered him. He is the subject of a number of urban myths and theories about where he came from. Want to visit his grave? No problem. Mary Chaplin Carpenter purchased a gravestone for him. Another urban myth says the ghosts of two albino twins inhabit the albino railroad tracks in St. Clair County. The story arose after a farmer blamed an 1800s epidemic that ravaged a nearby town on the albino kids. He tied the children to the tracks where they were killed by an oncoming train.
Number 3.
Along our stretch of the Mississippi River, when the word cave is mentioned, most of the population thinks of Mark Twain Cave south of Hannibal, Mo. It is, however, not the only cave in the area. Fewer than 10 miles east of Quincy on Ill. 104 is the small unincorporated town of Burton. The first settlers in Burton Township arrived in 1825. There are two villages in the township, Burton and Newtown. The village of Burton was platted in 1836 by Elijah M. King. A post office was established at Burton in 1840. On a steep hillside south of the town, a cave mouth opens above the creek. It first came to settlers' attention in about 1830, according to Henry Asbury's history. Likely it was known to the native population before that, but no record exists. A later history attributes its discovery to an area snake hunt, in which residents decided to rid their neighborhood of the reptiles. Apparently the population of snakes in the area was the stuff of horror tales, and records say that several hundred were killed by settlers in one day on the hunt along Mill Creek. Along with the snakes, Tilford Hogan and Perry Clingingsmith discovered the cave. The cave mouth is broad, easily seen, and more than 6 feet tall at the entrance. Inside, the floors were reported to be muddy and quite slick in places. No electricity or lights have ever been installed, and the cave remains in its natural state. The area became a popular picnic spot, courtesy of the wide entrance and relative simplicity of its layout. The cave formed during the glacial ages when water under the ice sheets trickled through cracks in the bedrock, dissolved the limestone and left a void. Groundwater then began to drip and create stalactites and stalagmites. One such pillar, formed where the drips from the top and the deposits from the floor met, was called the Devil's Hitching Post. Another, called the Spring, rose up from the floor, as deposits created a round column with a depression in the top that caught the drips from the ceiling and contained clear water. Another popular feature was a natural bridge near the ceiling in the second room, and an opening that resembles a window between two rooms. An article in the Herald-Whig in June 1947 reported that Burton Cave is interesting. It tends to be cozy, but its crooks and changes provide a sense of the mysterious necessary for any cave worthwhile. Its walls, carved from the earth by water long ages ago, are rugged. The ceilings vary, in some places smooth with the appearance of sandstone, in some places hobnailed with tiny stalactites, as the water carrying the lime from the rock drips to the floor. In other places the rocks form convolutions overhead. The cave has been reported to be about a quarter mile in depth or at a shorter length of 600 feet. In all descriptions it angles steeply downward and heads east, where it crosses under Mill Creek and terminates beneath a farmer's field. There are places where the ceiling height requires a crouch, and in one place a crawl through a low passage to reach the back portion of the cavern. As with all caves, there are some tales worthy of being told around a campfire. One is that two young boys were left at home on a nearby farm with strict instructions to stay put, but of course, they didn't. They entered the cave and lost their way, necessitating a search. 2 days later they were found and rescued from a steep pit at the end of the cave. While this makes a great story, it seems unlikely that such a simple cave layout would require a days-long search. However, there is a mention that the area of the cave in which the boys were found was afterward blocked off. No subsequent mention is made of a blocked portion of the cave. A ghostly tale concerns a family in the area for a picnic. Upon arriving at the location, they were surprised and horrified to confront a tall figure robed in black, standing before what appeared to be an altar with a lifeless woman lying upon it. The family vacated the area pell-mell and went to fetch authorities. When they returned with reinforcements, no trace remained of the robed figure or anything else. It is unfortunate that years of mostly unregulated public use led to the defacement of the cave and disfigurement of some of the natural deposits. The cave was owned by the family of local farmer W. H. Tandy from its discovery until the 1960s. Quincy University then leased it to study its biology and for scientific research and environmental education. Then the Nature Conservancy held it for a time and eventually released it to the Illinois Department of Natural Resources. The cave and about 85 acres is now a dedicated Illinois nature preserve. In 1997, a coalition of organizations including the Mark Twain Grotto, MTG, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, Bat Conservation International, MVOR Gating Fund and other governmental and private organizations constructed a barrier about 38 feet inside the cave entrance to protect the endangered Indiana bat, as well as up to 4 other species of bats that inhabit the cave during the year at various times. The barrier allows access for the bats, but protects them from human interference. Along with the endangered bats, the cave is home to some species of invertebrates that live their lives completely in darkness. As a result, they have lost pigmentation and are blind. According to the IDNR, a dedicated Illinois nature preserve is the highest level of land protection. The state offers data that designation means that every single item on the property is protected by law and cannot be removed, defaced, disturbed or destroyed. In addition, the cave is currently closed to public access due to white nose syndrome precautions and concerns of Spridinka, its associated fungus. Any unauthorized entrance or any trespass disturbance to the cave itself is punishable by law.
Number 4.
The story of the Burroughs Cave, like many other unexplained artifacts, has been called a hoax by the scientists and historians. I believe that it is far more likely to be a true story. More and more I see the truth being called a hoax and hoaxes being called truths. When I hear about something that is not popular with the intellectuals, I have more of a tendency to believe the opposite of these so-called intellectuals. I believe the hardworking, faith in God, everyday person far more than the intellectual, prideful, agenda-seeking progressive. I have spoken in depth with Wayne May, who has been looking into this cave for over 35 years, and Wayne is getting closer to discovering some additional support for this amazing discovery. Stay tuned. Burroughs Cave is the name given to an alleged cave site in a disputed location in southern Illinois discovered in 1982 by Russell E. Burroughs. Burroughs says it contained a number of artifacts. Through the many inconsistencies that revolve around Russell E. Burroughs' story of discovery and its findings, the cave and its contents are considered a hoax by mainstream archaeologists and some fringe archaeologists. During the time of the discovery, it was thought that the alleged cave must have been located in Richland County, somewhere near the town Ellyn, Illinois, where Burroughs resided at the time. Burroughs claimed that he did not want to give away the location of the cave because he believed that the cave would be robbed of its ancient treasures. Burroughs says he discovered the cave while hiking along the hillside miles away from the Ohio River, where he later claimed that he was searching for buckles from the Civil War era and pioneer horseshoes with his metal detector. Burroughs says that he came across a hole into which he fell that led him into the mysterious cave full of priceless ancient artifacts. The cave was said to have contained numerous archaeological artifacts, including carvings, coins, and other items. Many of the purported artifacts are said to have inscriptions in various ancient languages such as Phoenician and Iberian, but the inscriptions are generally meaningless. Burroughs claims that the cave is a tomb holding the artifacts and remains of 13 crypts. To date, nobody outside Burroughs' immediate circle has claimed to have been inside the cave, and many of the so-called artifacts have been revealed as forgeries. The cave and its artifacts are widely considered to be a hoax or fraud, even among proponents of other pseudo-archaeological theories such as Barry Fell. The idea has gained some traction within proponents of Mormon archaeology and hyperdiffusionism advocates such as Frank Collin, writing as Frank Joseph. Burroughs and the cave were one of the subjects of the second season Grand Canyon Treasure episode of America Unearthed, and the show Holy Grail in America, both produced by the History Channel. Thomas Emerson, the Illinois state archaeologist and former head of the Illinois Historic Preservation Agency, warned that the claims being made by Burroughs Cave proponents were sensational and not backed by solid evidence. With no evidence of the cave and its existence, many archaeologists quickly dismissed Burroughs and the alleged cave. Until about 1993, the predominant Burroughs Cave scenario involved Phoenician and Libyan, North African, colonists. Part of the evidence for this involved a stone tablet supposedly depicting a Phoenician vessel. Frank Joseph, one of the key figures involved with the cave, reproduced this in his book The Lost Treasure of King Juba, the evidence of Africans in America before Columbus, alongside an image of an actual Phoenician vessel that had been used by an associate of Burroughs who had originally identified it as Phoenician. In doing so, he cropped the image from the Burroughs stone, making the paddle end of a steering oar unidentifiable, but leaving the steering oars that are shown on what he calls, and the artist depicts, as the prow of the boat. The anthropologist and geographer George F. Carter, a supporter of the concept of transcultural diffusion, commented on the image saying, "The author did not recognize the paired oars, and hung an impossible oar over the bow. All others equally botched up, fanciful stern pieces, oar over bow, crude fakery by an ignoramus in the world of ships." The image used to identify the ship as Phoenician actually is dated to around 700 BCE, but Joseph described it as dated 170 BCE, possibly because around this time Burroughs Cave was being portrayed as the destination of Mauritanians, including exiled Romans, Africans, Celts, Christians, and Jews fleeing the Romans, taking with them and supposed treasure belonging to King Juba II.
Number 5.
Today, Watseka, Illinois, is a quiet Midwestern town nestled among wide swaths of farmland about halfway between Chicago and Champaign. In the late 1800s, tales of paranormal happenings in the tiny town were spreading throughout the nation's newspapers, making Watseka a household name. Mary Rolfe was a baby when she had her first cataleptic fit, and the incidents became worse as she grew. When the girl grew old enough to speak, she told her parents, Dorothy and Asa, that she could speak to spirits when she was in one of her trances. As a teenager, Mary gained the ability to read any book while completely blindfolded, and was prone to hours-long fits where it took up to 5 grown men to hold her down. She often cut herself with knives, hoping to bleed off a pressure she said she felt in her head. She began hearing voices, and began speaking in different languages she had no way of knowing, according history of yesterday. Her desperate parents wanted a cure for their daughter, and ultimately decided to commit her to an insane asylum, hoping that she could be treated. Mary died at the age of 19 in 1865. It turns out, Mary was neither truly gone nor happy about the death of her body. On July 11, 1877, another young woman in Watseka, Lurency Venom, told her mother she didn't feel well and laid down. Much like Mary Rolfe, 13-year-old Lurency suddenly became prone to long trances where she spoke in different voices, and gave details about places she'd never been. The girl also told her parents she'd been communicating with the spirits of 2 older siblings who had died many years before. According to Morbidology, doctors wanted the Venoms to send their daughter to an asylum, but they refused. Asa Rolfe, still reeling from the death of his daughter, wanted to see this other girl with an eerily similar affliction. Asa and a spiritualist who visited the Venom home noted that Lurency would introduce herself as different people, including an elderly German woman and a little boy. After meeting Asa, Lurency introduced herself as Mary and asked to go home. Lurency's body, inhabited by Mary's spirit, went to the Rolfe house and lived as Mary for months, even visiting Mary's friends. 10 months after Lurency first fell into a trance, the voice of Mary informed the Rolfes that Lurency's spirit was healed, and she'd return soon. When Mary's spirit relinquished control of Lurency's body, Lurency was reportedly healed and lived a relatively normal life, according to an Illinois Library article. Mary finally seemed to rest. In an episode of Ghost Brothers, Lights Out, Dalen, Jewin, and Marcus head out to see what's still lurking in the Rolfe house. Hauntings there have reportedly turned dark and aggressive throughout the last 100 years, with a variety of spirits and sometimes violent entities telling paranormal investigators to get out.